you ever feel like you're stuck on a treadmill, just running as hard as you can but going absolutely nowhere? Like your life has become this relentless blur of work, expectations, and relationships that are constantly shifting under your feet? If you're a guy in your late 20s or 30s, that feeling probably isn't just a bad week. It's what many are calling a modern existential crisis. It's that deep, gnawing sense of confusion and anxiety about where you're headed and what the whole point of it all really is. But what if that feeling wasn't a failure? What if it wasn't a sign that you're broken or somehow behind in life? In this video, we're not just going to talk about why this is happening. We're going to show you how this period of intense confusion might actually be the single most important turning point of your life. If that treadmill analogy hits a little too close to home, the first thing you need to know is that you are not alone. This feeling, this crisis, is a real thing. It's an inner conflict, a profound confusion about who you are, coupled with a nagging sense that your life has lost its purpose. It shows up as anxiety, a quiet kind of despair, or that feeling of being lonely, even when you're in a room full of people. You start questioning everything: your career, your friendships, your values, the very point of your daily grind. So why is this happening to so many of us right now and with such intensity? Look, it's not just in your head. It's a perfect storm of modern pressures that past generations just didn't have to deal with in the same way. First, let's talk about work. The pressure today is immense. For a lot of men in their late 20s and 30s, your career is a battlefield of constant performance reviews, the looming threat of layoffs, and a relentless pressure to be on 24/7. Recent studies show that employees in this age group are reporting the highest levels of stress, mostly driven by career uncertainty and a non-existent work-life balance. We're all handed this unspoken script. By your 30s, you should have it figured out. You're supposed to be climbing a ladder, but for so many of us, that ladder feels shaky. Or even worse, you get a few rungs up and realize it's been leaning against the wrong wall this whole time. You chase what you're told is success, but you forget to ask, success by whose definition? You check all the boxes: good job, decent salary, but that feeling of purpose you were promised just isn't there. That's not a personal failing. It's a symptom of a system that values your productivity way more than your purpose. Then there are our relationships. We're living in a great paradox. We're more technologically connected than any humans in history, yet we're also the loneliest. Social media has a huge part to play in this. Every time you scroll, you're hit with a curated highlight reel of everyone else's life. It looks like they're all crushing it, buying houses, getting married, traveling the world, while you feel like you're just treading water. That constant comparison will steal your joy. Research has found that the more time people spend on social media, the more likely they are to report feelings of anxiety and loneliness, because it fuels a sense of isolation and a total disconnection from your real, authentic self. And beyond the screen, our real-world relationships are also changing. Traditional milestones like marriage, kids, and buying a house are all happening later in life, if they happen at all. Now, this isn't a bad thing, but it means that the clear, predictable roadmap our parents had is just gone. There's more freedom, sure, but there's also way more uncertainty. And trying to forge deep, meaningful friendships as an adult, when everyone is swamped with their own lives, can feel almost impossible. You might have 1,000 contacts in your phone, but who do you call when you feel truly and utterly lost? That loneliness is a core part of this crisis. Finally, there's this bigger, broader anxiety just humming in the background of everything. You can't ignore the state of the world. We're staring down the barrel of huge global threats like climate change, economic instability, and intense political division. This isn't some distant news story. It creates a very real sense of dread about the future itself. It's hard to map out your 5-year plan when you're low-key worried about the 50-year plan for the planet. So you're feeling the weight of your job, the instability of modern relationships, and the anxiety of a world in turmoil. It is no wonder you feel lost. It feels like you're fighting a battle on 3 fronts: the personal, the social, and the global. But this is where the story gets interesting, because that feeling of being completely and utterly stuck is often the very thing that has to happen right before a profound change. Okay, so let's get to the heart of this. With all the pressure, all the anxiety, all the confusion we just talked about, What if I told you this crisis isn't a sign you're broken? What if it's a sign you're waking up? What if this pain is actually an invitation to grow? This isn't just wishful thinking. Psychologists have known for decades that these crises are not just normal, but critical, healthy stages of our development. First, there's a psychologist named Erik Erikson. He came up with a famous theory of the 8 stages of psychosocial development, arguing that we grow in stages over our whole lives. Each stage has a core conflict we have to resolve to move forward. For men in their late 20s and 30s, you're often caught in the chaotic transition between 2 of these stages. The first is intimacy versus isolation, which happens from your late teens to around age 40. The main goal here is to form real, loving, intimate relationships. If you succeed, you feel connected. If you don't, you feel lonely and isolated. Sound familiar? But right on the heels of that is the stage of generativity versus stagnation. This is where your focus starts to shift. You feel a deep need to create or contribute to things that will outlast you. Raising kids, mentoring someone at work, building a community, creating something positive in the world. Generativity is about making your mark. Stagnation is that feeling of being stuck, unproductive, and disconnected from the world. The modern existential crisis often explodes in the messy overlap between these 2 stages. You're trying to figure out who to share your life with, while at the same time feeling this urgent pull to make your life matter. You're wrestling with the biggest questions of both intimacy and legacy at once. And according to Erikson's model, this struggle isn't a bug, it's the feature. It's the developmental work you are supposed to be doing to mature. Now let's bring in another giant, Viktor Frankl. Frankl was a psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor who wrote the masterpiece Man's Search for Meaning. After living through the unimaginable horrors of Nazi concentration camps, he came to a profound conclusion. The primary driving force for human beings isn't pleasure, it's the search for meaning. He created a whole school of therapy around this idea called logotherapy. It's an idea that most people don't feel any kinship with because it rarely holds. Frankl said that suffering is a part of life we can't avoid, but what we can do is choose how we respond to it. He talked about the existential vacuum, a feeling of total emptiness and boredom that comes from a life without meaning. This is the crisis we're talking about. Frankl saw it in his patients who had everything, jobs, security, families, but felt their lives were completely pointless. Their despair wasn't chemical, it was a crisis of meaning. From Frankl's perspective, your existential crisis is your soul crying out for purpose. It's a healthy signal from your deepest self that the way you've been living just isn't cutting it anymore. The anxiety and confusion aren't the problem, they are the symptoms of an unmet need for meaning. That tension you feel is actually what pushes you to start searching for it. So let's go back to that treadmill. You feel like you're running, but the scenery never changes. That's because a treadmill builds strength, but it doesn't take you anywhere. This crisis, this period of running in place, is a stress test. It's building your psychological and emotional muscles. The discomfort, the boredom, the deep dissatisfaction with the view, that's the entire point. It's forcing you to finally stop and ask the most important question there is. Where do I actually want to go? This isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. It's a mandatory, soul-defining call to stop living the life you were told you should want and to start consciously and courageously building a life that is truly, authentically your own. It's a call to adventure. If any of this is hitting home for you, if you're in the middle of this struggle right now, I want you to do something. Pause the video for a second and just write one word in the comments that describes how this crisis feels for you. It could be lost, confused, stuck, empty, whatever it is. Sharing your story, even with just one word, does 2 powerful things. It helps you name the feeling, and more importantly, it shows the hundreds of other men reading these comments that they are not alone in this. And if you want to keep exploring how to navigate this and build a more meaningful life, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're in this together. Acknowledging and reframing this crisis is the first giant leap. But how do you actually start moving forward? How do you turn this new perspective into real, tangible change? The goal isn't to magically solve the crisis overnight. The goal is to start a process, a series of small actions that slowly carve out a path toward a life that feels like your own. Here are 4 practical steps to get you off the treadmill. You can't figure out where you're going until you know exactly where you stand. You have to stop running for a minute and take a hard, honest look at your life. This means getting real with yourself. Grab a journal or open a blank document and start asking some tough questions. No filter, no judgment, just right. Start with your values. What actually matters to you deep down? Not what you think should matter or what your parents or society told you to care about. What makes you feel alive? When do you feel most like yourself? Then audit your time. For 1 week, track where your 24 hours a day actually go. Be brutally honest. How much time is spent on work you hate, mindlessly scrolling your phone, watching Netflix? Now, how much time is spent on things that genuinely light you up or connect to your values? The gap between what you say you value and how you actually spend your time, that's where the dread lives. Finally, listen to your anger. What makes you angry about the world? What frustrates you? Your anger is often a signpost pointing directly toward what you care about most. Your frustration with corporate greed could mean you value justice. Your anger about pollution could mean you value nature. Don't push these feelings away, they're clues. This whole audit isn't about beating yourself up. It's about gathering data. Once you have some data, it's time to run some experiments. You don't need to quit your job and move to a monastery. That's overwhelming. Instead, think like a scientist. You have a theory about what might be meaningful. Maybe it's creativity, or service, or learning a new skill. Now you just need to test that theory with small, low-risk experiments. If you think creativity is missing, don't declare, "I'm going to become an artist." Instead, place a small bet. I will spend 1 hour every Saturday this month trying to learn guitar on YouTube. The goal isn't to become a rock star. The goal is just to see if the act of making music gives you a little spark of joy. If you think community is the issue, don't resolve to make more friends. Place a small bet. I will find a local hiking group and go on 2 hikes this month. The goal isn't to find your new best friend on day 1, it's just to see if being in that new environment feels good. Think of them as small bets on meaning. Some will pay off, others will be a total bust. And that's okay. It's all just data collection in the search for what makes you come alive. This takes all the pressure off of finding the one big answer and turns it into a game of discovery. Meaning is rarely found alone. Viktor Frankl himself said that we often discover our purpose through our connections with other people. This crisis is fueled by loneliness, so the cure has to involve real, genuine connection. This takes work. Start by moving from passive, digital scrolling to active, real-world connecting. Schedule a weekly or bi-weekly call with your closest friends, the ones you can actually be yourself with. It's the consistency that builds a real foundation. And seek out what some call a third place. It's not home, it's not work, but a place where you can build community around a shared interest. This could be a sports league, a book club, a volunteer group, a jiu-jitsu gym, a weekly chess game in the park. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it gets you around the same people regularly. These are the spaces where real friendships are made. Most importantly, practice being vulnerable with people who have earned your trust. Share your struggle. Talk about this feeling of being lost. Just saying the words, "I feel lost," to a friend is one of the most powerful things you can do. It kills the shame and isolation that lets this crisis grow in the dark. Finally, you have to truly accept the reframe we talked about earlier. This isn't a problem with a one-and-done solution. It's an ongoing journey. There will be good days and bad days. Some days you'll feel full of purpose, and other days you'll feel that old dread creeping back in. That's normal. The key is to change your relationship with those feelings. A powerful tool for this comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. The idea is to accept that difficult feelings like anxiety are going to show up, but you don't have to let them be in the driver's seat. You notice them, you let them be there, and then you commit to taking action based on your values, no matter how you feel. You can feel anxious and still go to that hiking meetup. You can feel uncertain and still spend an hour on that creative project. And on a daily basis, practice gratitude. I know it can sound like a cliche, but keeping a simple list of 3 small things you're thankful for each day has been proven to rewire your brain for happiness. It trains your mind to scan for the small pockets of meaning and joy that are already in your life, even when the big picture feels totally overwhelming. This modern existential crisis for men in their late 20s and 30s is real. It's hard, and it's born from the unique pressures of the world we live in today. It feels like running on a treadmill, a ton of effort just to stay in the same place. But this crisis is not a life sentence. It is a vital, necessary, and healthy signal. It's a call from your own soul to stop running on someone else's machine and to start your own journey. The agitation you feel, that's your fuel. The confusion, that's the catalyst. The anxiety, that's the alarm bell ringing, telling you it's time for a change. By auditing your life, placing small bets on what could be meaningful, rebuilding your connections, and embracing this as a journey, you can do more than just get through this crisis. You can use it as the single most powerful event that transforms your life from one of quiet desperation into one of deep, authentic purpose. The scenery never changes on a treadmill, but you are not a machine. You have the power to step off, choose a new path, and start walking toward a horizon of your own making. The journey starts now. Have you ever felt like you were born to do something, that you have a specific purpose, a calling you're meant to answer? For most of human history, that's exactly what philosophy, religion, and society have told us, that we show up in this world with a blueprint, a pre-written destiny. But what if that's all wrong? What if you were born as a blank slate, with no built-in purpose, and it's entirely, even terrifyingly, up to you to invent one from scratch? This was the revolutionary idea of the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, a concept that completely flips our understanding of who we are. And it all starts with 3 simple words. Existence precedes essence. Jean-Paul Sartre wasn't just a philosopher. He was a novelist, a playwright, a political activist, and a public intellectual who became one of the most famous and influential thinkers of the 20th century. Having lived through the chaos of 2 world wars, the Nazi occupation of France, and the ideological storms of the Cold War, Sartre's philosophy was forged in the fires of history. He saw the world get torn apart and felt a desperate need to figure out what it means to be human in a world that seems to have lost all meaning. At the very center of his philosophy, which we now call existentialism, is this one explosive idea: existence precedes essence. It might sound academic, but its implications are deeply personal and radical. It challenges the very foundation of how we see ourselves, our choices, and our place in the universe. So in this video, we're going to explore this foundational principle. We'll unpack what Sartre really meant by existence precedes essence and trace its profound consequences. We'll explore what it means to be condemned to be free, why that freedom brings a crushing weight of responsibility, and how we often try to escape this reality through what Sartre called bad faith. This isn't just a trip into a philosophical concept. It's an exploration of the human condition itself. It's about facing the dizzying vertigo of absolute freedom and the challenge of creating a meaningful life in a universe that offers 0 instructions. So, get ready to question everything you thought you knew about purpose, identity, and what it truly means to be you. To really feel the revolutionary power of Sartre's idea, we first need to understand the world of thought he was fighting against. For almost all of Western history, the dominant belief was the exact opposite of his. The idea was that essence precedes existence. This just means that the core nature, the purpose, the very definition of a thing, its essence, is thought of before it actually exists. Sartre explains this traditional view with a simple, brilliant analogy: the paper knife. Think of an artisan who wants to make a paper knife. Before they even pick up a tool, they have a clear concept in their mind. They know what the paper knife is for: cutting paper. They have a blueprint for it, a definition that includes all its necessary qualities. It needs a handle, a blade, and the blade has to be sharp enough to open an envelope, but not so sharp it's dangerous. The whole recipe, the set of qualities that allow the paper knife to be made and defined, its essence, exists in the artisan's mind before the physical object exists. For the paper knife, essence clearly comes before existence. This thinking wasn't just for manufactured objects. For centuries, philosophers and theologians applied the same logic to us. In the philosophical tradition, going all the way back to Plato, the idea was that each of us is just a reflection of an ideal form, a perfect human nature that exists on some higher, eternal level. For Aristotle, everything in the world, including us, had a telos, an ultimate goal or purpose it was striving toward. This idea found its most powerful expression in the Christian worldview. Here, God is the divine artisan, and we are his creation. Just like the craftsman knows exactly what the paper knife is for, God creates each person with a specific nature and purpose in mind. The concept of man exists in God's mind. Our soul, our purpose, our very essence, is designed by God before we're ever born. We're brought into existence to play a pre-written part in a divine plan. And even when the Enlightenment started to chip away at religious authority, this basic structure of thought stuck around. Philosophers like Diderot, Voltaire, and even Kant, while pushing God to the side, still held on to the idea of a universal human nature. They believed there were certain built-in traits, a shared essence, that defined all of us. This is the world of thought Sartre was born into. It's a comforting world in a lot of ways. It tells you that you are here for a reason. There is a right way to be human, a path you are meant to follow. Your identity isn't something you have to invent. It's something you have to discover, like finding a hidden treasure that was there all along. Your life has a built-in, pre-packaged meaning. This is the deeply ingrained idea that Sartre is about to flip completely on its head. On a packed night in Paris, October 29, 1945, right after the devastation of World War II, Jean-Paul Sartre took the stage to give a lecture called Existentialism is a Humanism. The ideas he laid out that night sent shockwaves through the intellectual world and came to define a generation. It was here that he clearly explained the foundational rule of his philosophy. Sartre starts by making a critical distinction. The paper knife analogy, he says, works perfectly for things we make, but it completely falls apart when you apply it to one very specific kind of being, a human. The reason it fails is tied to Sartre's starting point, atheism. For Sartre, the 18th century philosophers didn't go far enough. They got rid of God, the divine craftsman, but they tried to keep the blueprint. Sartre argues that if God does not exist, then there can be no preconceived human nature, no divine mind where our essence was designed. The blueprint is gone, right along with the craftsman. This leads him to his dramatic reversal. For human beings, and only for human beings, existence precedes essence. So what does that actually mean? Sartre puts it like this. Man first of all exists, encounters himself, surges up in the world, and defines himself afterwards. Man is nothing else but that which he makes of himself. That is the first principle of existentialism. Let's break that down. It means you and I are born into this world without a pre-written purpose, without a set character, without a fixed identity. We are simply here. We exist. When we first show up, we are nothing, a blank slate. There is no human nature that says we have to be one way or another. We aren't born cowards or heroes, honest or dishonest. We are born simply as existence. Only after we exist, as we live, as we move through the world, and most importantly, as we make choices, do we start to create our own essence. Our essence is the sum total of our actions, our commitments, and our decisions. It is not something we discover. It's something we invent, moment by moment. You aren't what you were born to be. You are what you choose to be. You are both the artist and the canvas, the sculptor and the stone. Your life is your creation, and at the end of it, the person you've become is the masterpiece or the mess that you and you alone have made. This is a radical break from everything that came before. It pulls the rug out from under any idea of fate, destiny, or a fixed human identity. It says you are not defined by your past, your family, your genetics, or your society. These things are what Sartre calls your facticity, the given circumstances of your life you can't change, like where or when you were born. But your facticity is just the backdrop. It's the situation you're in. It's not your essence. Your essence is what you do with that facticity. You are defined by your choices. This single idea is the wellspring from which all the other powerful and often terrifying parts of existentialism flow. It's the key that unlocks a world of absolute freedom, overwhelming responsibility, and the constant temptation to pretend none of it is true. So if there's no blueprint, no divine plan, no fixed human nature to guide us, what are we left with? Sartre's answer is stark and profound. We are left with freedom. Not just a little bit of freedom, not just choosing between two flavors of ice cream. We are left with a radical, absolute, and inescapable freedom. In one of his most famous paradoxes, Sartre declares that human beings are condemned to be free. Why condemned? We usually think of freedom as the greatest gift. Why talk about it like a prison sentence? Because for Sartre, this freedom isn't some light and happy privilege. It's a heavy, terrifying burden. We are condemned because we didn't choose to be free. We were simply thrown into existence, another of Sartre's evocative terms, which he borrowed from the philosopher Martin Heidegger. We just appeared here, without asking to, and from the moment we become self-awareness, we are stuck with this total freedom. We are not free not to be free. It's the one thing we can't escape. And what does this radical freedom mean? It means that every single thing we do is a choice. And not just the big things, like a career or a partner. Sartre argues we even choose our character, our values, and our response to our emotions. You are not a sad person by nature. You are choosing to engage with the world through a project of sadness. You aren't an angry person. You are choosing to be angry. This can sound wrong. Surely, we don't choose to feel grief. But for Sartre, while we don't choose what happens to us, our facticity, we always choose our response. We choose the meaning we give to events. We choose the attitude we adopt. Think about someone who says, "I can't help it, I'm just a shy person." For Sartre, this is an excuse. There is no pre-existing shyness forcing you to act a certain way. At every moment, you are choosing shyness by not speaking up, by avoiding eye contact, by saying no to invitations. To be a shy person is to have a project of being shy, a project you actively restart with every choice you make. The same goes for a hero. A hero isn't born with a heroic soul. A hero is just someone who consistently makes heroic choices. They build their heroism through their actions, and at any moment, they could choose differently and stop being a hero. This freedom is absolute. There are no excuses. You can't blame God because there is no God. You can't blame human nature because it doesn't exist. You can't blame your past or your upbringing because you are always free to choose how you respond to them. We are, as Sartre says, without excuse. This is the vertigo of freedom. It's the dizzying realization that there is nothing holding you up, no safety net, no one to tell you what to do. You're standing on the edge of a cliff of infinite possibilities and you have to choose. Even not choosing is a choice. If you refuse to decide, you have decided to refuse. There is no way out. You are the sole author of your life, and every word, every sentence, every plot twist is your decision. This is the magnificent and terrifying weight of being condemned to be free. With absolute freedom comes absolute responsibility. This is the logical, unavoidable next step. If you are nothing more than the sum of your choices, then you are completely responsible for what you are. There's no one and nothing else to blame. As Sartre puts it, the existentialist puts every man in possession of himself as he is and places the entire responsibility for his existence squarely upon his own shoulders. This responsibility works on two levels, and the second one is even more intimidating than the first. First, you are responsible for you, for your own self. Every action you take helps create your essence. If you act like a coward, you are responsible for making yourself into a coward. If you are lazy, you are responsible for creating an essence of laziness for yourself. This is heavy enough. It gets rid of all our favorite excuses. You can no longer say, "I was just in a bad mood," or "that's just how I am." According to Sartre, you chose that mood, and you created that how I am. You have to own it. But Sartre pushes this idea of responsibility much further, to a universal conclusion. He claims that when we say that man is responsible for himself, we do not mean that he is responsible only for his own individuality, but that he is responsible for all men. This is probably one of the most challenging parts of his philosophy. How can my one personal choice make me responsible for all of humanity? Sartre's logic is this. When we choose to do something, we aren't just making a choice for us. We are, at the same time, confirming the value of that choice. We are, in effect, presenting an image of what a human being is. By choosing to do something, we're saying this is how a person should act. We are creating a universal value. In fashioning myself, Sartre writes, I fashion man. Let's use an example. If I choose to lie to get out of a tough spot, I'm not just committing one little act of dishonesty. In that moment, I'm helping to create a world where lying is an acceptable human action. I'm putting forward an image of humanity as something that lies. My choice is a vote for all of humankind. On the other hand, if I choose to be honest even when it's hard, I am creating an image of humanity as something that values truth and setting a standard. This means every single one of our choices carries an immense weight. It's not just about us. It's about the vision of humanity we are creating and endorsing with our lives. When we choose, we have to ask ourselves, what if everyone did this? Am I okay with the image of humanity I am creating with this action? This is what Sartre means by responsibility for everyone. It's a moral framework built not on commands from God or abstract rules, but on the profound implications of our own freedom. We are responsible for the meaning we put into the world. It's a crushing, almost unbearable weight. To realize that your every move helps to define what it even means to be a person is to understand the full, staggering scope of Sartrean responsibility. Realizing the full extent of our freedom and responsibility isn't some peaceful, Zen-like state. According to Sartre, it's a deeply unsettling experience that creates three specific, powerful feelings: anguish, forlornness, and despair. It's important to see these as technical terms. They aren't just passing moods, but profound states of being that show up when we face the human condition head-on. First, there is anguish. This is the direct feeling of our total and deep responsibility. It's the emotional weight we feel when we get that in choosing for ourselves, we are choosing for all of humanity. The person who feels anguish is the one who gets that their choices aren't trivial. They are creating values. Sartre gives the example of a military leader who has to decide whether to send his soldiers into an attack where some will certainly die. He makes the choice alone, and he is responsible for their lives. No orders from a general can truly free him from this responsibility. He has to interpret the orders and decide what to do. This direct, conscious feeling of being the one who has to choose without any excuse, and knowing that choice has irreversible consequences, that is anguish. It's the same feeling Sartre argues that we should all feel in our daily lives. The anxiety of someone who knows their decision sets an example for everyone. Most of the time we run from this feeling. We pretend our choices are small and don't matter. But for an existentialist, anguish is the sign of someone who is fully aware of their own freedom. Second, there is forlornness. This feeling comes straight from Sartre's atheism. Forlornness, he says, means that we are alone with no excuses. It is the realization that God does not exist and that we have to face all the consequences of that fact. If there is no God, there are no pre-made values, no divine commandments written in the sky to guide us. We are left utterly alone. Sartre tells the story of one of his students during the war who was facing a terrible choice: stay in France to care for his grieving mother who lived only for him, or try to escape to England to join the Free French forces and fight for his country. What should he do? Christiana morality says to love thy neighbor, but who's the neighbor here? His mother or his fellow soldiers? Kantian ethics says to treat people as ends, never as means. But if he stays, he treats the soldiers as a means to his own comfort. If he leaves, he treats his mother as a means to his patriotic goal. There are no universal rules that can solve his problem. He is alone, abandoned, and forced to invent his own solution. That feeling of being left to our own devices in a morally silent universe, that is forlornness. We have no guide, and no help. We are condemned to invent our own path. Finally, there is despair. For Sartre, despair doesn't mean giving up. It means we have to limit ourselves to what depends on our own will, on the set of probabilities that make our action possible. It's recognizing that we cannot control the world outside of our own actions. You might have a huge project, to write a great novel, to build a just society. You can commit yourself completely to it, pouring all your energy into it. But you cannot control the outcome. You can't control how other people will react. The world and the people in it are fundamentally beyond your command. Despair, then, is about acting without hope. Not in a pessimistic way, but in the sense of not relying on any possibilities that are outside your immediate control. The existentialist doesn't hope their friends will help them. They act, and their friends' help becomes one of the realities they deal with. They don't hope for a better world. They act to make the world better. Despair is the stoic realization that we are our actions, and nothing more. We are what we do, not what we dream of doing. Anguish, forlornness, and despair are not signs that existentialism is a gloomy philosophy. For Sartre, they are signs that you are awake. They are the growing pains of a mind that has finally come to terms with the breathtaking and terrifying reality of its own freedom. The human condition that Sartre describes, this state of absolute freedom, total responsibility, and the feelings of anguish, forlornness, and despair, is an incredibly tough reality to live with. So it's no surprise that we are masters of self-deception, constantly finding ways to escape this burden. Sartre has a specific name for this act of lying to ourselves: bad faith. Bad faith is basically pretending we're not free. We do this by trying to convince ourselves that we are objects, that our lives and actions are determined by outside forces, just like a rock or a table. We deny our freedom and our responsibility for who we are. Sartre gives his most famous example to explain this: the waiter in a cafe. He asks us to watch this waiter. His movements are a little too precise, a little too quick. He leans forward with an eagerness that is just a bit much. His voice has a level of interest in your order that is slightly over the top. Sartre's conclusion: he is playing at being a waiter in a cafe. The waiter isn't just being a waiter, he's performing the role of a waiter. He has soaked up all the social expectations of waiterness and is trying to perfectly embody them. He's trying to turn his entire being into that of a waiter, to become a kind of machine whose essence is to be a waiter. What's wrong with that? The problem is that the waiter is lying to himself. He is a human being, a consciousness, a site of pure freedom. He can never be a waiter in the same way an inkwell is an inkwell. An inkwell is a being in itself. It's solid, it has a fixed essence. A human, though, is a being for itself, a consciousness, a freedom that must constantly create itself. By trying to shrink his entire existence down to the fixed role of waiter, he is denying his freedom to be anything else. He's treating himself like an object, and that is an act of bad faith. And we are all guilty of this. Bad faith is everywhere. Think of the person who says, "I have to stay in this terrible job because I have a family to support." While needing to support a family is a real part of their situation, they're in bad faith if they present it as an absolute force that completely removes their freedom to choose. They are always free to look for another job, to change their lifestyle, to find other solutions. By saying "I have to," they are pretending to be an object trapped by circumstance, instead of a free person making a choice. Or think of the person who defines themselves completely by a label. "I'm an introvert. I'm a victim. I'm a tough guy." When we do this, we're often using the label as an excuse to dodge our own choices. The introvert uses their label to avoid the anxiety of social events. The victim uses their label to avoid taking responsibility for their own life. The tough guy uses his label to avoid showing vulnerability. In every case, they are hiding from their freedom behind a mask they chose to wear, shrinking their limitless human potential down to a single, static definition. The final paradox of bad faith is that, on some level, you have to know you're lying to yourself. To run from freedom, you first have to be aware of the very freedom you're running from. It's a fragile state, a constant effort to look away from the truth of our own condition. Bad faith is the comfortable prison we build for ourselves to escape the terrifying open field of our own freedom. If bad faith is running away from freedom, what's the alternative? How do we live in a way that's true to the human condition Sartre describes? The answer, the core existentialist virtue, is authenticity. Authenticity is the polar opposite of bad faith. It is the courageous act of clearly seeing and embracing our radical freedom and total responsibility. It means living without excuses, without hiding behind roles or labels, and without pretending we are just products of our environment. The authentic person is someone who faces the anguish, forlornness, and despair of the human condition and chooses to live by their own self-created values. Authenticity isn't a set of rules to follow, it's a way of being. It's about being honest with yourself about what it means to exist. Let's look at our examples again through the lens of authenticity. The waiter, acting authentically, would still do his job, but he'd do it with the full awareness that being a waiter is just one project he has freely chosen. He wouldn't reduce his entire identity to his job. He would understand that he is a free consciousness who is, for now, choosing to wait tables. He would know he is not just a waiter, he is a father, a friend, a dreamer, a limitless freedom that can't be captured by any one role. The person in the terrible job, if they were to act authentically, would have to face their situation honestly. Instead of saying, "I have no choice," they would say, "I am choosing to stay in this job right now because I am prioritizing my family's financial security over my own immediate happiness, and I take full responsibility for this choice and what comes with it." This simple change in words reflects a huge shift in awareness. It turns them from a passive victim into an active agent who owns their decisions. It acknowledges their freedom, and in doing so, opens up the possibility of making a different choice down the road. It's critical to understand that authenticity isn't a destination. It's an ongoing process, a continuous project of creating yourself and being aware of it. You can slip into bad faith at any moment. The authentic life demands constant vigilance, a perpetual self-check to make sure you're not falling back into comfortable lies. In a way, being authentic might even mean accepting that it's impossible to completely escape bad faith. In a complex world, our choices will always have effects we didn't intend, and we may have to make choices that limit the freedom of others. The authentic person, however, doesn't pretend this isn't happening. They own their responsibility for the bad faith that's part of a difficult choice, and in doing so, they limit its power. Authenticity is not about finding your true self as if it were a hidden object. That would be going right back to the idea that essence precedes existence. Instead, authenticity is the process of creating your true self through free and responsible choices. It is the difficult, demanding, and ultimately liberating path of becoming who you are, by taking full ownership of the person you are making. While the core of Sartre's early philosophy focuses intensely on the individual's experience of freedom, it's a mistake to see existentialism as a purely navel-gazing philosophy. As his career went on, especially after World War II, Sartre became more and more politically active, trying to merge his existentialist ideas with a Marxist view of society. He argued that a philosophy of radical freedom must also be a philosophy of social and political responsibility. How does a philosophy that starts with the lone, free individual lead to a call for collective action? The bridge is responsibility. If, as Sartre argued, we are responsible not just for ourselves but for all of humanity, then this responsibility can't just stop at our personal choices. It has to extend to the social and political world we live in. An authentic life, then, requires not just personal honesty, but also a clear-eyed look at one's place in society and a willingness to take the blame for the injustices within it. Sartre became a fierce critic of colonialism, racism, and economic exploitation. He saw these systems as kinds of institutionalized bad faith. They are structures that treat entire groups of people as objects, as beings in themselves, with a fixed inferior essence. For Sartre, oppression is the act of denying a person their freedom, of trying to turn a free consciousness into a thing. Therefore, to live authentically in an unjust society means to fight against that injustice. It's not enough to be personally free if others are oppressed. The freedom of the individual is tied to the freedom of everyone. This led Sartre to embrace Marxism, which he saw as the philosophy that best understood societies as battlegrounds between the powerful and the powerless. But he didn't just become a dogmatic Marxist. He tried to create a unique blend, an existentialist Marxism. He criticized orthodox Marxism for being too deterministic, for erasing the individual and their freedom and reducing history to a set of impersonal economic forces. For Sartre, it is always individuals making choices within their historical situation who push history forward. Class analysis is crucial, but it has to be grounded in the choices of individuals. This created a powerful, if sometimes tense, political philosophy. As an existentialist, he insisted on the absolute personal responsibility of every single person for social problems like racism or poverty. You can't just blame the system. You are part of the system, and your actions or your lack of action either support it or challenge it. At the same time, as a Marxist, he recognized that our freedom always operates within a specific social and economic situation that powerfully shapes our choices. This later phase of Sartre's thought shows that existence precedes essence isn't a retreat into the self. It's a radical call to action. It says that because the world has no built-in meaning or justice, we are the ones responsible for creating it. Our freedom is not a license to do whatever we want. It is a command to engage with the world and to fight for a society where the freedom of every single person can be realized. True authenticity, in the end, has to be collective. We started this journey with a simple, unsettling question: what if you were born without a purpose? We've followed Jean-Paul Sartre through the radical landscape of his answer. We've taken apart the ancient idea of a predefined essence and replaced it with a vision of humanity that is both terrifying in its openness and thrilling in its potential. Existence precedes essence is so much more than a clever philosophical slogan. It's a complete reboot of our place in the universe. It tells us that we are not actors reading from a pre-written script, but authors writing our own story on a completely blank page. The universe gives us no blueprint, no divine instruction manual, no guaranteed meaning. We are thrown into this world alone and without excuse. From this one starting point, the entire existentialist drama plays out. We are condemned to be free, a freedom so total it's terrifying. With this freedom comes a responsibility so huge, it makes us accountable for the very image of humanity itself. Facing this reality head-on plunges us into anguish, forlornness, and despair, not as signs of failure, but as proof that we are finally awake to our condition. And yet, we are masters of escape. We flee into bad faith, pretending we are just objects, defined by our jobs, our pasts, our social roles, anything to avoid the dizziness of our own freedom. The only cure is authenticity, the brave and constant struggle to own our choices, to live with our eyes open, and to take responsibility for the self and the world we are creating. This responsibility, as Sartre came to believe, ultimately pushes us beyond ourselves and into the shared fight for a more just and free world for everyone. Sartre's philosophy is not easy. It offers no simple comforts, no easy answers. It strips away our illusions and forces us to face the stark reality of our condition. But in doing so, it gives us something far more valuable. It gives us back our lives. It tells us that our existence isn't trivial, but a project of ultimate significance. The meaning of your life isn't out there somewhere, waiting to be found. It is in here, waiting to be created. And you are the artist. Sartre's ideas are a lot to take in, and they definitely raise as many questions as they answer. What do you think about existence precedes essence? Do you find the idea of this kind of radical freedom liberating or just terrifying? Where do you see bad faith playing out in the world around you or even in your own life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear how these ideas land with you. And if you found this exploration of existentialist thought valuable, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more deep dives into the ideas that have shaped our world. Thanks for watching. Imagine a man condemned by the gods to an eternity of pointless labor. His task is to push a massive boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down every single time he nears the top. His entire existence is just this one futile, hopeless task. This is the myth of Sisyphus. But what if this ancient story of meaningless struggle actually holds the key to living a happy life in a world without meaning? The French philosopher Albert Camus thought it did, and his answer might just change the way you see your own daily struggles. He believed that inside this picture of ultimate torture, we could find a blueprint for ultimate freedom. He argued that this man, this prisoner of the gods, is the ideal hero, the absurd hero, and that his consciousness, his defiance, and his strange, rebellious joy are the only weapons we have against a silent universe. This isn't a story about despair. It's a story about rebellion. It's the story of how to find meaning, not by looking to the heavens, but by looking at the rock right in front of you. Before we get to the solution, we have to really understand the problem. And the problem is a feeling. It's a feeling that doesn't creep up on you in moments of high drama, but in the quiet, grinding routine of daily life. Camus describes it perfectly. Rising, streetcar, 4 hours in the office or the factory, meal, streetcar, 4 hours of work, meal, sleep, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday according to the same rhythm. This path is easy to follow most of the time. We get into the habit of living long before we get into the habit of thinking. You know the drill. The alarm goes off. That old familiar enemy. You go through the motions, the coffee, the shower, the commute. You sit at a desk, stand at a station, or drive a route. The tasks are familiar. The faces are familiar. The low-grade exhaustion is very familiar. You're a part of a big, complicated machine. You're productive. You're moving. But then, one day, a crack appears. That's when the why shows up. Why am I doing this? Not just this spreadsheet or this machine, but this whole thing, this life. You look out the window and feel a sudden, sharp disconnect. The world outside seems to be moving on, oblivious, like a foreign country, and you feel like a stranger to yourself. This isn't necessarily depression. It's a moment of unsettling clarity. The carefully constructed scenery of your life suddenly collapses. You've been playing a part, following a script handed to you by society, by family, by a younger version of yourself. And in that moment of collapse, you see the machinery backstage. And you realize you have no deep, unshakable reason for any of it. This is the feeling of the absurd. It's like being an actor who's forgotten his lines on a stage with no director and no audience. It's the dizzying realization that the rulebook you've been following might be completely made up. We build our lives on the promise of tomorrow. Later, we tell ourselves, when I get the promotion, when the kids are grown, then it will all make sense. But this is just a way to avoid the one certainty we have, that one day it all just ends. That horror, that feeling of your own body rebelling against the finality of time, that is the absurd. Think about it. We are meaning-making animals. We crave reasons, clarity, a grand story. We look at this chaotic, beautiful universe and desperately want it to make sense. We ask the big questions. Why are we here? What's our purpose? What does it all mean? This hunger for an answer is as natural to us as breathing. We are built to ask, why? And what answer does the universe give us back? Silence. An indifferent, unreasonable silence. The stars don't offer a purpose. The laws of physics don't give us a moral code. We are screaming our questions into a void, and the void does not scream back. This is the heart of the problem. This brings us to what the absurd actually is, and it's one of the most misunderstood ideas in philosophy. For Camus, the absurd is not just the simple idea that life is meaningless. It's more complicated and more interesting than that. The world itself isn't absurd, a mountain isn't absurd, the universe expanding isn't absurd. They just are. They don't need a reason that would make sense to a human. And by the same token, our minds aren't absurd. Our desire for logic and meaning is perfectly rational for us. It's the engine of our art, our science, our entire civilization. The absurd is what happens when these two things, our need for meaning and the world's lack of it, smash into each other. It's the clash, the confrontation, the divorce. Camus said, what is absurd is the confrontation of this irrational and the wild longing for clarity whose call echoes in the human heart. The absurd is born from this collision. It depends as much on us as it does on the world. In fact, it's the only real link between us. Imagine someone who is passionately in love with a person who doesn't love them back. In fact, doesn't even know they exist. The lover isn't absurd. The object of their affection isn't absurd. The absurdity is in the relationship, that hopeless one-way connection. That's us and the universe. We are the passionate lover, crying out for a purpose. The universe is the beloved, totally indifferent to our cries. The absurd is the painful, constant tension of that relationship. This is a huge distinction. A lot of people hear absurdism and think it means nihilism, the belief that nothing matters, so there are no values. But Camus isn't a nihilist. He doesn't say there is no meaning. He says, I do not know whether this world has a meaning that transcends it, but I know that I do not know that meaning and that it is impossible for me just now to know it. The core of the absurd is this limit on what we can know. We can describe the world with science, but none of that knowledge will ever be enough to tell us that our existence has some preordained significance. Realizing this is profoundly destabilizing. It rips away all our certainty. We are exiles in our own lives, longing for a home we can never find. So the question Camus asks, the one he calls the one truly serious philosophical problem, is this. Once you truly see this gap between you and the world, what do you do? If your search for meaning is just a futile shouting match with silence, is life still worth living? Once you're faced with the raw reality of the absurd, the temptation to escape is overwhelming. The pain of this constant conflict is immense. So naturally, we look for a way out. Camus identifies two main escape routes. He rejects them both, not because they're illogical, but because they're dishonest. They're forms of surrender. The first and most direct escape is physical suicide. Camus opens his book with a bombshell. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. He argues that deciding whether life is worth living is the most fundamental question there is. To choose suicide is to confess that life is too much for you and that it's not worth the trouble. It's saying the absurd has won. For Camus, this is a cop-out. Suicide doesn't solve the absurd, it just gets rid of one half of the equation. Remember, the absurd is the confrontation. If you remove yourself, the confrontation ends. But it isn't resolved. It's just evaded. It's like knocking over the chessboard because you're losing. You haven't proven the game is pointless. You've only proven you're unwilling to keep playing. To keep living is to keep the absurd alive. Suicide is surrender. Camus wants us to revolt. The second escape is more subtle and way more common. He calls it philosophical suicide. If physical suicide is destroying the self to escape the conflict, philosophical suicide is destroying your reason to do the same. This is the classic leap of faith. Faced with a terrifying, irrational universe, the mind looks for a safe harbor. It finds one by inventing a higher meaning. A god, a transcendent purpose, an afterlife, a political utopia, anything that explains everything. It's the act of saying, I can't stand this lack of meaning, so I will believe in one, even though my own reason tells me it's a fantasy. It's a leap because you're jumping over the chasm of the absurd instead of learning to live inside it. You use your own rational mind to discover the limits of reason. And then, at the very last step, you throw reason away for the comfort of faith. Camus saw this in other existentialist thinkers who recognized the absurd, but then took an irrational leap into believing in God. For Camus, this was a betrayal. It's swapping the harsh freedom of the absurd for the comforting chains of a pre-packaged meaning. Both kinds of suicide try to make the problem go away. But Camus insists our task isn't to erase the problem, but to live with it, to stare it down and to wring every drop of life from it. The point is not to escape the prison, but to learn how to be free inside its walls. So if we reject these two great escapes, giving up on life and giving in to illusion, what's left? We're left standing in the desert, knowing we're thirsty and knowing there's no oasis. It's a terrifying place to be, but it's also an honest one. And for Camus, it is only from this point of honesty that a truly human life can begin. If you've ever felt this conflict between your search for meaning and the world's indifference, and you want to find a way to face it without running away, then stick around. This is the kind of stuff we explore on this channel. So consider subscribing as we look for genuine tools for a life of purpose. Having rejected the easy answers, Camus brings us back to our man and his rock. He brings us back to Sisyphus. And now we can finally see why he isn't a symbol of despair, but the image of human triumph. Let's look at his punishment again. A rock, a mountain, and an eternity of useless work. The gods figured there's no punishment more dreadful than futile, hopeless labor. Sisyphus's situation is a perfect mirror of our own. His labor is futile. The rock never stays at the top. His labor is hopeless. There's no salvation to look forward to. And his labor is endless. It's the same thing, over and over, just like our own cycle of rising, streetcar, work, meal, sleep. Sisyphus is the ultimate absurd man. He lives without hope, doing a meaningless task for all time. He is the modern worker whose fate is no less absurd. So where's the victory here? Where's the hero? Camus tells us to look at a specific moment in the story. The interesting part isn't the struggle up the mountain. It's the moment after the rock has rolled back down. It's the walk back. During that return, that pause, Sisyphus becomes conscious. As he walks down the mountain to get his stone, he isn't straining or laboring. He's thinking. He is looking his fate right in the eye. He knows the rock is at the bottom. He knows he has to push it up again. He knows it will fall. And in that moment of clear-eyed awareness, he is superior to his fate. He is stronger than his rock. The gods condemned him to push a stone. They didn't condemn him to hope it would stay there. The very thing that was meant to be his torture, his awareness of the pointlessness of it all, becomes the tool of his victory. The gods wanted to break him with hopelessness, but by embracing that hopelessness, he makes their punishment meaningless. He accepts his fate, but on his own terms. This is his life now. He owns it. This is the absurd hero, not someone who escapes their fate, but someone who makes it their own through rebellion. He doesn't just put up with the absurd, he lives it. Sisyphus's quiet, conscious defiance gives us a practical guide for living an absurd life. Camus pulls 3 consequences from this: my revolt, my freedom, and my passion. These aren't rules, they're attitudes. They are the tools of the rebellion. First, there is revolt. Revolt is the constant, active refusal to accept the absurd passively. It's keeping that tension alive. You don't give in to hope, philosophical suicide. Sisyphus's revolt is the simple act of walking back down the mountain. Every time he goes to get the rock, he's recommitting to the struggle. He's saying, I see that this is meaningless, and I'm going to do it anyway. For us, revolt is getting out of bed each morning, fully aware there is no cosmic plan for our day, and choosing to live it anyway. It's when that why pops into your head, and you answer it not with some made-up reason, but with a defiant, because I choose to. The second consequence is freedom. What does freedom look like for the absurd hero? It's not what you think. By giving up hope for a better future or an eternal life, he is freed from the future. He's no longer a slave to some grand destiny or divine plan. He's liberated from the pressure of trying to justify his existence. His freedom is the freedom of right now. If this life is all there is, then what matters most isn't living the best life by some external standard, but living the most life. It's the freedom to be totally present. Sisyphus is free because he isn't worried about tomorrow. Tomorrow will be the same as today. This allows him to be completely absorbed in the act of pushing his rock. That moment is his entire world. Finally, there is passion. When you truly accept that life is short and has no built-in meaning, a strange thing happens. It doesn't devalue life. It makes every moment infinitely precious. Passion is the choice to live with intensity. Because the absurd man has no hope for eternity, he pours all his energy into the quantity and quality of his time on earth. He feels the rough surface of the rock, the sun on his back, the strain in his muscles, and he knows these sensations are the only truths he can be sure of. There's no dress rehearsal. This is it. His passion isn't for the goal, because there is no goal. It's for the struggle itself. Revolt, freedom, and passion. These are the pillars of the absurd life. They aren't a cure for the absurd. They're the way to live with it, turning a philosophy of despair into one of courageous, defiant joy. This brings us to the stunning final line of Camus' essay. After describing Sisyphus, his torture, his awareness, his rebellion, Camus draws his conclusion. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. And then the revolutionary thought. Almost imagine Sisyphus happy. Happy? A man in eternal, pointless torment? It seems crazy. But this is the entire point. Sisyphus's happiness isn't the shallow happiness of success or pleasure. It's a difficult, profound happiness that comes from finding your purpose in the struggle itself. He is happy because his consciousness and his scorn make him the master of his fate. The rock is his thing, the struggle is his kingdom. He has created his own meaning in a world that offered him none. Camus teaches us that we are all Sisyphus. We all have boulders to push. In our jobs, our relationships, our private battles, life will often feel absurd. We can be crushed by this, or we can be like Sisyphus. We can choose to be conscious. We can choose to revolt, to push our boulder with passion and defiance, not because we hope it will stay at the top, but because the pushing itself is where our dignity is found. The meaning of life isn't an answer to be discovered. It's a reality to be created, moment by moment, through the clear-eyed, rebellious, and passionate embrace of our condition. It is looking at the silent universe, feeling the full weight of the rock in front of us, and choosing to push, choosing to live, and choosing to be happy. If this exploration of Camus resonated with you, let me know in the comments how you find meaning in your own struggles. What's the boulder you push every day, and how do you find the strength to do it? For more philosophy you can actually use, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Anxiety. It feels like a glitch in the system, doesn't it? A bug in the software of modern life. We scroll through endless feeds, weigh 1,000 different career paths, and try to build perfect digital versions of ourselves, all while this low-grade dread hums just beneath the surface. We treat anxiety like an error message, something to be patched with wellness apps, productivity hacks, and a desperate search for a calm, optimized life. But what if anxiety isn't a bug at all? What if one of the most powerful ways to understand, and maybe even use, your anxiety comes from a 19th century Danish philosopher? Meet Søren Kierkegaard. He believed that anxiety wasn't a malfunction, but a fundamental, even essential part of being human. He called it the dizziness of freedom, and he argued that this very feeling we try so hard to escape is actually the gateway to becoming our most authentic and creative selves. So let's explore how his nearly 200-year-old ideas can help us navigate the overwhelming world we live in now, not by getting rid of our anxiety, but by learning how to dance with it. Let's be honest for a second. The modern world gives us more freedom than any generation in history, and it's both a blessing and a curse. From the moment you wake up, you're hit with a tidal wave of choices. What career should you pursue? There are thousands of options. Where should you live? The globe is an open map. Who should you even be? Social media hands you a catalog of perfect identities to try on. We're told we can be anything, but instead of feeling exhilarated, we often just feel paralyzed. This paralysis is the fertile ground for modern anxiety. It's that fear of missing out, FOMO, that eats at you when you see a friend's curated life on Instagram. It's the choice paralysis you feel in the grocery store, staring at 50 kinds of olive oil, terrified of picking the wrong one. It's the constant pressure to have a side hustle, to monetize your hobbies, to build a personal brand, and to optimize every single second for a future that feels completely uncertain. We've been taught to see anxiety as a personal failure, a chemical imbalance, a disorder that needs fixing. We pathologize it, medicate it, and meditate it away, hoping to reach some mythical state of constant calm. The multi-billion-dollar self-help industry is built on this promise. Just follow these 5 steps, buy this supplement, and you can delete anxiety from your life. But has anyone ever stopped to ask if that's even what we should want, or if it's even possible? It's like we're so focused on silencing a smoke alarm that we don't notice the house is on fire. We're treating the symptom, but the underlying condition, according to our guide for this journey, isn't a sickness at all. The condition is freedom. Have you ever felt that vertigo, not from looking down from a great height, but from looking out at all the branching paths your life could take? That mix of thrill and terror from knowing your next choice could change everything? If you have, you're not broken, you're not malfunctioning, you're feeling exactly what the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard identified as the essential human experience. He called it anga, and understanding it doesn't just explain our modern problems, it shows us a way through them. So who was this man who so radically reframed anxiety? Soren Kierkegaard. Born in Copenhagen in 1813, is probably the last person you'd expect to be a self-help guru for the 21st century. He wasn't a calm, enlightened master. He was a complex, often depressed man whose life was filled with inner turmoil, public mockery, and deep, painful questions. He was, in a way, patient zero for the very condition he diagnosed. Kierkegaard grew up in a wealthy but intensely religious and gloomy home, shadowed by his father's powerful sense of guilt and melancholy. This gave him a sharp eye for introspection and a lifelong obsession with sin, faith, and what it means to be an individual. He was a well-known figure on the streets of Copenhagen, always sharply dressed, famous for the long walks where he did his best thinking. He studied philosophy and theology, but he quickly came to despise the dominant philosophy of his day, Hegelianism. Hegel and his followers tried to explain everything, all of history, all of humanity, with a single grand rational system. Kierkegaard thought this was absurd. For him, this obsession with abstract systems completely missed the point of being a living, breathing person who has to make choices. He fought against the idea that truth was some objective, universal formula. The only truth that mattered, he insisted, was subjective. It was the truth you live, the truth you choose, the truth you suffer for. He cared about the single individual, that person standing alone before an ocean of infinite possibilities, forced to choose without a map or a guarantee. His own life was proof of his philosophy. The most defining event was his engagement to a young woman named Regine Olsen. He loved her deeply, but he was tormented by the idea that his own melancholy and inner darkness would make a happy marriage impossible. He made the agonizing choice to break it off, a decision that haunted him and fueled his writing for the rest of his life. It was a choice made in the crucible of anxiety, a real-life example of the painful freedom he wrote so much about. He wrote furiously, often using a series of strange pseudonyms, not just pen names, but entire characters he created to explore ideas from different points of view. Through books like Fear and Trembling, The Concept of Anxiety, and The Sickness Unto Death, he started a quiet revolution. He argued against the mindless conformity of the crowd and the empty rituals of the church, calling for a passionate, personal, and authentic way of living. In a time of fixed social roles, Kierkegaard championed the terrifying but essential task of creating yourself. He's now known as the father of existentialism, a philosophy that puts freedom, responsibility, and personal experience front and center. He didn't offer easy answers. He offered a mirror. He was a guide who explored the darkest, most confusing parts of the journey right alongside us, which makes him the perfect guide for our anxious age. He never pretended to be immune to it. He lived it, he wrestled with it, and he turned it from something to be feared into something that could create meaning. So what did Kierkegaard actually mean by anxiety? First things first, we have to get one thing straight. He wasn't talking about what we normally call fear. Fear, or frag in Danish, has an object. You fear a spider. You fear public speaking. You fear an intruder. Fear is concrete. You can point to the thing that's scaring you. Anxiety, or angus in Danish, is different. Its object is nothing. But this nothing isn't an empty void. It's the nothingness of all future possibilities. It's that gut punch realization that the future isn't written yet, and you, a free person, are holding the pen. Anxiety is the feeling of being aware of your own freedom. And that awareness, Kierkegaard says, is dizzying. His most famous analogy, the one that really unlocks the whole idea, is of a man standing on the edge of a cliff. As he looks down into the abyss, he feels two things. First, there's the natural fear of falling. He knows if he slips, it's over. That's fear. But then he feels something else, a weird, terrifying impulse rising up from inside him, the impulse to jump. It's not a death wish. It's his mind reeling from the horrifying possibility that he could jump. Nothing is physically stopping him. In that moment, he is radically, terrifyingly free. That feeling, that dizzying mix of being drawn to and repelled by the abyss of his own freedom is Angus. It is, as he wrote, the dizziness of freedom. For Kierkegaard, this anxiety isn't some psychological quirk. It's a fundamental part of being human. An animal doesn't feel anxiety like this. It lives by instinct. It just does what it does. But we humans are self-aware. We know we exist, and we know our lives are built out of choices. That's what separates us from the animals and throws us into the world of possibility. He traces this all the way back to the story of Adam in the Garden of Eden. Before God says, "Do not eat from the tree of knowledge," Adam is innocent, in a state of dreaming spirit. He doesn't know he's free, so he isn't anxious. But the moment God gives the command, a new possibility is born, the possibility of disobedience. The command accidentally reveals to Adam that he can choose. The possibility of possibility arrives, and with it, anxiety. Anxiety then comes before sin. It's the innocent awareness of your potential to choose. This is why Kierkegaard calls anxiety a sympathetic antipathy and an antipathetic sympathy. It's a strange hybrid feeling. We're drawn to our freedom because it's where all our potential for creativity and growth comes from. But we're also repelled by it, antipathy, because it comes with a massive burden, the responsibility for our own lives. Every time you choose one path, you are choosing against all the others. Choosing to be a doctor means choosing not to be a musician or a world traveler, at least for that moment. This constant clash between the infinite things you could be and the finite thing you can be is the source of our anxiety, and it's not a feeling you should try to cure. In fact, Kierkegaard would say that a person who feels no anxiety isn't fully human. They're living in spiritlessness, either lost in distractions or just mindlessly going along with what society expects. They aren't using their freedom, and by refusing to use it, they are losing themselves. So anxiety is a signal. It's your spirit waking up. It's proof that you are a free person, standing before the terrifying and glorious possibilities of your own life. The dizziness isn't a sign that you're sick. It's a sign that you're on the verge of creating yourself. Seeing anxiety as the dizziness of freedom is a cool intellectual idea, but its real power is in how we can apply it to our lives today. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a practical toolkit for navigating the modern world. Right now, our culture treats anxiety like an enemy. It's a disorder to be managed, a bug to be squashed. Kierkegaard flips that script. He invites us to see anxiety not as a flaw, but as a totally natural and necessary reaction to being free. This perspective is incredibly liberating. It means when you feel anxious about a huge life decision, a career change, a relationship, a move, you aren't malfunctioning. You are doing the most human thing possible, grappling with a choice that matters. The anxiety is just a signal that the stakes are high. This idea actually shows up in some modern therapies. Existential therapy, which was directly influenced by Kierkegaard, doesn't try to eliminate anxiety. Instead, therapists help people face it, explore what it means, and use it as fuel for growth. They help you listen to your anxiety, not just silence it. Even something like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, touches on this. CBT often involves confronting your fears instead of avoiding them, which is exactly what Kierkegaard was talking about. He knew that avoidance just makes anxiety worse. Hovering in limbo, refusing to make a choice, doesn't get rid of the dizziness. It just prolongs it. And his ideas directly speak to the modern crisis of authenticity. Kierkegaard wrote a lot about despair, which he didn't see as just sadness. For him, despair was the sickness unto death, the feeling of not being your true self. This happens in two ways. Either you get lost in an endless sea of possibilities and never commit to anything, or you conform so completely to what society wants that you lose yourself. Sound familiar? In the age of social media, we are under crushing pressure to perform, to put on a show for everyone. We compare our messy, real lives to the polished highlight reels of others and end up feeling fake and inadequate. For Kierkegaard, the anxiety that comes from this gap between your real self and your performed self is a critical warning. It's your soul's alarm bell, telling you you're living inauthentically. He'd urge us to use that feeling not as a reason to feel ashamed, but as a cue to step back, question the script we're following, and reconnect with who we really are. By the way, if you're getting something valuable out of this deep dive into Kierkegaard and you want to see more videos that break down big ideas for modern life, take a second to subscribe and click the notification bell. It's a simple choice that really helps the channel out and makes sure you don't miss what's next. Beyond mental health, Kierkegaard's ideas have a powerful application for creativity. Most of us think that anxiety is the enemy of art. We think we need to be calm and centered to do our best work. Kierkegaard and thinkers he inspired like the psychologist Rollo May argued the exact opposite. They said anxiety is a necessary ingredient for creativity. Think about it. What is creativity? It's bringing something new into the world. It's destroying old patterns to make way for the new. That process is always, unavoidably, going to cause anxiety. The writer staring at a blank page feels the dizziness of infinite story choices. The entrepreneur starting a business stares into the abyss of possible failure and success. The artist with a blank canvas is faced with the possibility of possibility. Every creative act is a leap into the unknown, and that leap always comes with anxiety. If you took away all possibility, you'd have no anxiety, but you'd also have no creativity. A world without anxiety would be a world without art, innovation, or progress. It would be static, predictable, and totally inhuman. This completely reframes the creative struggle. That feeling of dread before you start a new project, that's not a sign you're an imposter. It's the feeling of freedom. It's the engine warming up. And this isn't just philosophical speculation. Some modern psychological research has explored this link, finding that many highly creative people don't necessarily have less anxiety, they just have a different relationship with it. They've learned how to harness it. The key isn't to run away from the anxiety of the blank page, but to learn to sit with it, to listen to what it's telling you, and then to make a choice. Write the first word, make the first brushstroke, type the first line of code. Kierkegaard said that anxiety can become a serving spirit that against its will leads him where he wishes to go. It's a force that, when you learn to ride it, can propel you toward your most original and profound work. So we've figured out that anxiety is an inescapable, even useful, part of being human. It's the dizziness of our own freedom. But just knowing that isn't enough. If we just stand on the edge of the cliff forever, stuck in the dizziness of all our options, we're still paralyzed. A life of unlived potential is its own kind of hell. So how do we move? How do we act when we're faced with this paralyzing freedom? Kierkegaard's answer is in one of his most famous concepts, the leap of faith. Now, when people hear leap of faith, they usually think of a blind religious jump into believing in God. And for Kierkegaard, a deeply Christian thinker, it definitely included that. But the idea of the leap is much broader and is incredibly useful for anyone struggling with the paralysis of choice today. The leap of faith is the antidote to the dizziness. It's the act of committing to a path, a choice, or a belief with your whole heart, even though you don't have a guarantee. It's the moment you stop weighing every option and just choose. You choose the career, you choose the partner, you choose the project, you choose who you want to be and start being it. This isn't a blind leap into the dark. It's a conscious choice you make with your eyes wide open to the risk. You know you might be wrong. You know it might fail. You know there are no guarantees. The leap is you using your freedom not just to think about possibilities, but to actually create one. It's the understanding behind his famous line, "To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily, not to dare is to lose oneself." In our data-driven, optimization-obsessed world, this is a radical idea. We want 5-star reviews for our life choices before we make them. We want to read the last chapter of the book before we start page 1. We want a guarantee a relationship will last forever before we let ourselves be vulnerable. So we hover in this state of semi-commitment, with one foot always out the door, just in case a better option comes along. Kierkegaard would say that isn't being smart. It's being lost. It's a refusal to live. The leap is what gives your life a direction. It's what forges a self. Before the leap, you're just pure potential, a dizzying cloud of maybes. After the leap, you are someone doing something, being something. This commitment doesn't get rid of anxiety forever. New choices will always come up. But it resolves the anxiety of that particular choice. It gives you solid ground to stand on, even if it's just for a moment. Think about it in practical terms. You can spend years researching the perfect city, analyzing data on crime rates and job markets, and you'll still never be 100% sure. The leap is signing the lease. You can endlessly debate if you're ready to start a creative project. The leap is opening the laptop and writing the first sentence. It's the decision to move forward, to risk failure and imperfection, that saves us from the hell of infinite unlived potential. We started by thinking of anxiety as a bug in our modern software, but Kierkegaard's wisdom shows us that it's the wrong way to look at it. Anxiety isn't a bug. It's a core feature of the human operating system. It's not a sign of sickness, but a sign of health, the undeniable proof that we are conscious, self-aware, and free. This feeling, this angst, is the dizziness of freedom. It's the vertigo we feel when we look out at our own future, and it's the uncomfortable, essential energy that fuels our personal growth and our best creative work. Trying to get rid of it completely isn't just impossible, it's dangerous. A life without anxiety would be a life without meaning, without choice, and without the chance to become who you're meant to be. Kierkegaard teaches us that the goal isn't to cure our anxiety, but to find the courage to face it, to learn to listen to it, and to use its energy to engage with the world more fully. The answer to the paralysis of infinite choice isn't to have fewer options, but to have the courage to take the leap of faith and commit to one. Because it's in the act of commitment that a self is truly born. Silly. So the next time you feel that familiar pang of anxiety, that dizziness when you look at your future, maybe try something different. Don't immediately reach for a distraction. Don't write it off as a personal failure. Just pause, acknowledge it, and ask yourself two very Kierkegaardian questions. What freedom is this anxiety showing me? And what am I going to do with it? If this gave you a new way to think about things, please share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. How does this idea of the dizziness of freedom connect with your own experience? Thanks for watching. You did everything you were supposed to do. You followed the rules, checked all the boxes, the right education, the right job, the right relationships. On paper, your life adds up. But in the quiet moments, when all the noise of the day finally fades, a question haunts you. Is this really it? It's probably not some loud, dramatic crisis. It's more of a quiet, creeping emptiness, a feeling that you're just going through the motions, playing a part in a story you don't remember writing. The modern world, for all its promises of happiness, can leave us feeling disconnected and hollow. We're told that success and pleasure are the answer, but for so many of us, they just make the void feel bigger. But what if that feeling of meaninglessness isn't a sign that you're broken? What if it's not a bug, but a feature, a signal that you're ready for a deep and necessary shift? Today, we're going to explore where this feeling really comes from, mixing a little modern psychology with some ancient wisdom. And most importantly, I'm going to share one powerful and surprising tool that can help you rebuild your sense of purpose from the inside out. So where does this feeling even come from? Why do so many of us, living in a world of relative comfort, feel so completely adrift? It's a complex problem, but it comes down to a clash between how we're wired and the world we live in. Psychologically, our brains are ancient machines, built for one thing: survival. They're hardwired to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and save energy. This creates something called the hedonic treadmill, that constant chase for the next thing that will make us happy. The promotion, the new car, the next vacation. But as soon as we get it, the buzz wears off, and we're right back where we started, looking for the next dopamine hit. This cycle kept our ancestors alive, but it's a terrible recipe for fulfillment. It keeps us chasing a horizon that we never actually reach. And then there's the philosophical side of it. For centuries, thinkers we call the existentialists, people like Kierkegaard and Sartre, argued that life has no prepackaged meaning. We're just born into a universe that, on the surface, doesn't seem to care that we're here. Realizing this can trigger an existential crisis, where you have to grapple with your own freedom, your own mortality, and your place in the cosmos. You realize you're terrifyingly free to choose your own path, and that responsibility can feel like a crushing weight. Some have called it the dizziness of freedom. Modern life just pours gasoline on this fire. We're bombarded with other people's definitions of success. We see the highlight reels of their lives and get told what a good life should look like. But when we get those things and still feel empty, the despair gets even deeper. The problem isn't that you're failing at the game of life. It's that you're playing the wrong game. You're playing the one society handed you, not the one you were meant for. That gap between the life you're living and the life that feels truly yours is the source of the ache. It's the existential vacuum that psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl talked about. A void that no amount of money or achievement can ever fill. So what do we do? How do we find our way out of this void and start building a life that actually feels like our own? This leads us to the one tool I promised you. It's not a secret, it's not a quick fix, and you definitely can't buy it. It's a practice, and it requires real honesty and courage. It's a tool that modern therapies like acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, and Frankl's logotherapy are built on. The tool is learning to use your values as a compass. I know that might sound a little abstract, but it is the most powerful way to build a meaningful life. See, values aren't goals. Goals are destinations you can reach, like run a marathon or get a degree. Values are directions. They're the compass that guides you on the entire journey, and they are available to you in every single moment. They answer the question, deep down, what truly matters to me? Living a life that's out of sync with your core values is like trying to walk north while your internal compass is screaming at you to go west. It's exhausting, confusing, and it makes you feel completely lost. That feeling of meaninglessness is the distress signal that comes from this internal conflict. When your actions don't match up with what you hold most dear, you feel it as a deep, hollow ache. On the flip side, study after study shows that when we live a life guided by our values, we feel less stress, make better decisions, become more resilient, and feel a genuine sense of purpose. Living by your values is just another way of saying you're living authentically. It's when the person you are on the inside and the person you are on the outside are finally in sync. So, how do we actually use this tool? It's a three-step process. First, you have to get quiet and actually listen to yourself. We're almost never asked to do this. We're taught to absorb the values of our family, our culture, our society. So this might feel a little strange at first. Grab a pen and paper and just reflect on these questions. Don't judge. Don't overthink. Just write what comes up. First, think about a peak experience in your life. A time you felt truly alive. What were you doing? And what personal qualities were you expressing? Was it kindness, courage, creativity, connection? Second, what makes you angry? Often, what makes us furious is seeing one of our core values violated. If you can't stand injustice, fairness is probably a key value. If inefficiency drives you crazy, maybe competence is really important to you. Third, who do you admire and why? The qualities we respect most in others are often the ones we wish to build in ourselves. And finally, there's what some therapists call the tombstone exercise. Imagine your own funeral. What would you hope people would say about who you were? That you were loving, adventurous, a person of integrity? That you made a difference? From that reflection, try to pull out a list of your top 5, 10 core values. Words like authenticity, connection, growth, compassion, stability, adventure, creativity, service, wisdom, health. There are no right or wrong answers. These belong to you and you alone. Just take a second. Based on those questions, what's one value that popped into your head, something that just feels right? Share it in the comments. It's a surprisingly powerful thing to just put it out there, and you might connect with other people who are heading in the same direction. Okay, this is the important part. With your list of values in hand, you're going to do an honest checkup on your life. Look at the big areas: your work or school, your most important relationships, your health, and your free time. For each area, ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much is this part of my life aligned with my values? Is your job, where you spend 40 hours a week, a place you can be creative? Or does it crush that part of you? Are your relationships built on the deep connection you value, or do they feel superficial? Does your free time feed your sense of adventure, or is it just spent on mindless distraction? This isn't about beating yourself up. It's just about collecting data. You're becoming a detective in your own life, searching for the source of that empty feeling. The places where you find a huge gap between your values and your reality, that's where the meaninglessness is coming from. And seeing that gap is the first step to closing it. Knowing all this doesn't change anything. You have to act on it. The final and most crucial step is to start making small, deliberate choices that move you just a little bit closer to your values. You can't think your way into a meaningful life. You have to act your way into it. This doesn't mean you need to quit your job and move to a mountaintop tomorrow. That's overwhelming and usually not the answer. The goal is to start with tiny, manageable actions. If you value connection, maybe you commit to one real phone call with a friend this week instead of just texting. If you value creativity, maybe you block out 30 minutes on Saturday morning to write, draw, or play music just for you. If you value health, maybe you take a 10-minute walk on your lunch break. Every one of these small actions is like casting a vote for the person you want to become. Each choice sends a signal back to your brain that says, this is what matters. This is who I am. Over time, these small actions build on each other. They create momentum. They slowly reshape your life, not around what other people expect, but around your own internal compass. This is what it means to take responsibility for your own meaning. As Frankl said, life is the one questioning us, and we answer with how we live. Feeling like your life is meaningless is one of the most painful things a person can go through. It can leave you feeling numb, cynical, and completely alone. But it is not a life sentence. It's a wake-up call. It's an invitation from the deepest part of you to stop living on autopilot and start living on purpose. The tool to answer that call is already inside you. It's the process of getting clear on what truly matters to you, your values, and then finding the courage to line your life up with them, one small choice at a time. This journey isn't about finding some grand, cosmic purpose hidden under a rock. It's about creating purpose. It's about consciously filling your moments, your days, and your life with the meaning that you choose. It's a slow, ongoing process of becoming more of who you already are. It will require you to be brave, to sometimes disappoint others, and to learn to live with the uncertainty that comes from making your own path. But on the other side of that struggle isn't a life that's free from pain, but a life that's full of purpose. A life that, when you look back, you can say with total conviction, this was mine. I built this.